with whom? Whose serpent sported a plume? Who rode this way to the tomb? And who married Leopold Bloom? Who's getting red and with whom? Who's up in Giovanni's room? And who's reading what and with whom? And who's frightened old lady doom? Any literary swats or to answer the lot and know who's reading what and with whom. And tell me what Tennessee play was a movie called Boom. Tell me who's reading what and with whom.
Good evening. Good evening. This is a literary quiz, as you should have already gathered if you can read or if you heard Ian Page's words during that opening song. We have two teams of literary swats here, so to introduce them, the opening questions from that song. Antonia Fraser's team is captained by Antonia Fraser. Now, Antonia, first question, the first line of that song, whose serpent sported a plume?
The plumed serpent.
All you have to do is tell me the author. I mean, this is the easiest round. It's going to get harder after this.
D.H. Lawrence?
Absolutely right. We can go strictly and swiftly on your right, your strong right arm, John Gross, critic, publisher, author of The Rise and Fall of the Man of Letters. Who wrote This Way to the Tomb?
That's tricky. Little Voices, Arts, Theatre, about 1948. Could it be Ronald Duncan?
The late Ronald Duncan died, I think, this year. Absolutely correct. Can we complete the set with Salman Rushdie, novelist, winner of last year's Booker Prize for Midnight's Children, who married Leopold Bloom?
Oh, well, she's called Molly. I'm afraid I can't remember her maiden name. She probably wasn't a maiden for very long.
We spent all day trying to research it, and we couldn't find it either. So we go on to John Mortimer's team to see if they're easily as impressive. John, from your team, who's up in Giovanni's room?
Well, that's one of the very important American novels I've always managed to avoid reading. And it's by a man who's absolutely no relation to Stanley Baldwin, who's called James Baldwin.
Slightly darker of
darker and more interesting in his love affairs, I should think.
However, you have the author right than Stanley. I don't know. Well, maybe the new racy version of Stanley Baldwin's
if he ever
life.
got the pipe out, I suppose he was a bit of a raver.
Moving on, well, we perfectly move on to Angela Carter, who's come in just ahead of her question. Angela Carter, novelist and critic. And femme de lettres, I think you wanted to describe that.
Yes.
What frightened old Ada Doom?
It was something nasty in the woodshed, but one never knew what.
Right, and the book was by?
It was by Stella Gibbons.
And
it's Cold Comfort Farm.
Cold Comfort Farm, exactly. Just to make sure that we've got a full house, Sally Emerson, novelist, editor of the revised and revived and revivified Books and Bookmen. What Tennessee play made a movie called Boom?
The milk train doesn't stop here anymore.
Absolutely correct, and the movie had Noel Coward, Burton and Taylor in it. Splendid. No marks for anybody because we have one innovation for this quiz, no scoring. Team members will simply imagine the opinions of their readers rising and falling in direct proportion to the brightness of their answers. Right, first round. In this round, you'll hear the voice of a famous writer discussing or describing another famous writer. We want you to identify both. I should point out that the questions are extremely short, so lean forward and pin back your ears. The first is for Antonia Fraser. Here's yours.
I must say, it's rather funny reading through those volumes, the prefaces, and finding out that this one he took from something, you know, saying, well, I suppose he thought the plot was just a sort of thing you had to have, but that didn't amount to anything. Of course, the way to read is read him in the Oxford book quotations. He really is good. Because, of course, there is a lot of stuff in you could do without. You know, my Lord of Cheltenham or whatever it is.
Antonia, do you have a clue about either writer or subject? Speaker or subject?
Could the subject be P.G. Wodehouse?
The speaker could be P.G.
Oh,
Wodehouse.
I meant the speaker when I
right,
said the subject.
Right. Wild use of words so early in the programme.
Well, then could it be Oscar?
No.
No, sure.
No.
I don't know of any other writers.
We can show you a picture of the other writer. How about that one? Sir Francis Bacon?
Or Shakespeare, depending on your taste.
Exactly, Shakespeare. Totally correct. It's P.G. Wodehouse at the age of 90, giving his views on excusable Philistinism at the age of 90 on William Shakespeare. We go on to the next one, to the rival captain, John Mortimer. Here is a mystery voice for you.
As I know from long personal experience, his books are almost impossible to review. It's easy enough to compose a general dissertation about his idiosyncratic art. But as year by year each book appears, there's singularly little to be said about it except to acknowledge the event gratefully and joyously.
I've absolutely no idea. It could be Anthony Powell, is it?
No, it's not Anthony Powell. It's somebody whose work with whose work you've tangled.
Well, then it's Evelyn Waugh.
Speaking.
But what made Evelyn Waugh joyous? Anthony Powell, strangely enough.
There's a picture coming up, probably, to help you. A picture of him as a young man. I think in his Long Island study, but as a young man, as a middle-aged man.
He's P.G. Wodehouse.
He is indeed. That we had P.G. Wodehouse on Shakespeare
before. It keeps on cropping up. I don't understand.
We've now finished. We've now finished with P.G. Wodehouse. Do you feel a richer person for your tangling with Evelyn Waugh's work over weeks and weeks and weeks of Brideshead?
Yes, I do. I feel a richer person for having tangled with P.G. Wodehouse.
You wouldn't like to attack the whole of the P.G. Wodehouse oeuvre in the same way that you did Brideshead?
No, but I think that tangling with P.G. Wodehouse is perhaps a more productive experience.
Do you enjoy P.G. Wodehouse?
Very, very much indeed. Second only to Shakespeare and God. And I don't believe in God, so therefore P.G. Wodehouse is the man.
It is an extraordinary phenomenon, isn't it, that somebody should have written for so long and been so popular and should not have had any dip, but indeed critical opinion of him should have gone up so much since his death.
Yes, because he's the most original user of English prose, apart from the lady sitting on my left and right, that we've had.
Is there anybody who misses the charm of P.G. Wodehouse on?
Yes, I miss it completely.
Do you?
I find them absolutely.
Have you tried hard?
Yes, I've tried quite hard. You can't try very hard with books that you don't like, because you know pretty soon after about 4 pages that you're thoroughly fed up with them.
It's nice that we're not scoring, because you don't lose any of the points that your captain won for your side. And we go to Angela Carter. And here, perhaps something of a trick question, is a lady's voice for you.
If the book were to fall into my hands now, out of the blue, I think I would read on, in spite of occasional boredom and irritation, with the goings-on of a group of self-absorbed, emotionally immature and over-glamorized young people. And I think I'd say at the end, yes, this girl has a great deal to learn, but she has some promise.
Now, does that speak to you at all, straight away?
Well, it's definitely lady, isn't it? I mean, this is a lady and not a woman, isn't it? Or a femme.
The only people who wrote in those days were ladies.
Okay, and she's talking about perhaps another lady, Jane Austen, is she talking about?
No, she's perhaps not talking about another lady. That's the trick in the question.
That's the trick in the question. She's talking about Evelyn Waugh.
No, she's talking about herself.
Is it Ivy Compton Burnett?
No, we've got it on. Would you like to concede it to the skipper on next to God on this side?
It's a writer I very much admire, so I recognise it. It's Rosamund Lehman on Rosamund Lehman.
Yes, we've got a picture of Rosamund Lehman. It's Rosamund Lehman talking about her first novel, which was called
Dusty Answer.
Dusty Answer, exactly, yes. If you look back on your first book, would you have as charitable a view of it as I thought that rather nice, warm feeling that she had about it?
It always amazes me. My first book was a sort of a version of King Arthur, and it always amazes me how readable it is. And then I remember that I had to write it very quickly, so it was one line down the page, you know, that trick. So of course it's readable.
Let's go through the first books. John Mortimer, your first book was a novel called Charade, published in 1947. Do you remember, how would you have reviewed that if it came on your desk now?
Well, it was terribly good. And it actually, it was extremely good, and it got wonderful notices. And someone said, not for 15 years have I read such a good book, and I couldn't think what the hell he'd read 15 years ago. The ones I wrote after that weren't so hot, but the first one I wrote was very good.
Sally, your first book was only published in 1980. Did you have an immediate reaction against it?
I thought it was absolutely awful. I couldn't understand why anybody liked it. But then I reread it about a few weeks ago, because I've got the same characters in my next book, so I had to. I thought it was really rather a remarkable book. Rather good, I thought.
Is either gentleman prepared to admit to writing a terrible first novel?
Yes. Yes, I wrote absolutely appalling first.
It was all right.
Well, it was sort of appallingly all right.
Okay, well, let's move on for the last one, because this is Sally's, and the voice is very easy. I'm not entirely sure that the subject is so easy, but here comes Sally Emerson's voice.
He likes the Church of England. It's natural to him, like it is to me. It doesn't seem to me anything. It isn't a fancy religion, the Church of England. It's the natural one to belong to. And he's high, so am I. I think Christianity is the mainspring of his work.
Sally, who's speaking?
You said the voice was easy.
Oh dear,
Shouldn't have said that.
I've clammed up your ears. Anybody help you on your team?
Yes.
I don't know, T.S. Eliot.
I don't know. John Betjeman, like
It's John Betjeman's voice, and the question is who he's talking about. Did you say he was talking about T.S. Eliot, John,
I said,
on
yes.
Sally's behalf?
Yes.
You were absolutely right. It was John Betjeman talking about T.S. Eliot, and that's the end of round one. And since we have no score, both teams are equal at the moment and both doing extremely well. Round two, and since this is a television quiz, it has to be relentlessly visual. And we're now going to show you, for no extra charge, 2 extracts from feature films adapted from famous literary sources with varying degrees of success. John Mortimer's team, look carefully. Here is the first.
You know you promised to play.
Yes,
Did Dr. Jekyll play golf?
The question is, who was going to play Gough, and why did he not go?
Because he turned into a raving beast.
Exactly. I've never heard a more difficult question solved more quickly. That comes from the 1919 production. You might have said, as I'm sure you recognise, the star was Sheldon Lewis.
Indeed,
The
yes,
co-star was Gladys Field.
Yeah,
And it was indeed Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We're indebted to Real Art Films for it. And we have, in fact, the denouement now, which you're going to see for no extra charge.
He's going to do it.
Keep taking the tablets. This is where the acting starts.
That would really affect his force swing or whatever.
Very subtle editing coming in. Now, yes. I think a round of applause for Sheldon Lewis. Right, the second one is much more difficult. It's an American interpretation of a European classic novel, and it's for your team, Antonia.
Why, it's Tony Glass.
You should know that this being Hollywood, they changed the sex of one of the principal characters.
Yeah.
They know on this side, but they're not being asked. On this side, they also know, so they should be asked first.
We think it's Crime and Punishment.
You're absolutely right. I suppose there's really nothing else to say about that. We all know who wrote Crime and Punishment. The movie was called Fear. Anybody who's an admirer of the director Alfred Zeisler will have seen about 1 minute of his work. It starred Peter Cookson and Warren William. None of whom we see much about on the screen these days. So we move on. Honours even, still. And here's a brand new old song by Carol Brahms and Ian Page. In fact, they have embedded 11 popular song titles in it. These titles, in turn, are all literary quotations. Now, we want both teams to see how many literary sources they can turn up for us. And to sing the song, the composer, Ian Page.
Speak low when you speak love. It is to be or not to be. You'll know if you speak love that you're between the devil and the deep blue sea. I am always true to you, darling, in my fashion. I have been since the days of wine and roses. You are my motive, my cue for passion, a sentimental journey which my heart proposes. I came to wife it wealthily. Of thee I sing, baby, to my surprise. Oh, love thy neighbor, love me stealthily, and do speak low. The night has 1,000 eyes. But speaking low, I feel I have to say that I don't think I'll fall in love today.
Well, on Antonia's paper, I can see a bold 11 written down or underlined. I can see that she's missed one, so she must have one wrong. How many do we think we've got on this side? You've got a lot?
Yeah, quite a lot.
Go down them quickly. Anybody got one in the first line?
No.
Right, you missed in that case. Much Ado, Act 2, Scene 1, Speak Low, If You Speak Love. To Be or Not to Be, I suspect most people identified.
I think, yes, I think we know
You get that?
Yeah.
Right.
It's a film, isn't it? By Lubitsch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it was a song which Tony Martin recorded. Mr. Esposito was the composer. I'm always true to you, darling, in my fashion. Can we trace? Dowson. I have been
Cinera.
faithful to
Is it
Cinera
Cinera?
in that. Yes, Cole Porter used that. The next line, does anybody care to identify?
Is it Swinburne, is it The Day of White?
It's Dowson again, the days of Wine and Roses.
John Gross said that.
Yeah, there's no song called Cue for Passion, which I'm sure somebody's
Hamlet,
underlined.
Hamlet.
It does come from Hamlet, but it's never been a song. So that's
Motive and Cue for Passion for Revenge.
by the nature of a trick question. There has been a song called Cue for Romance, but not Cue for Passion. The next line, do we find a title?
Stern.
Sentimental Journey, Stern, correctly. And I Come to Wive It Wealthily.
Taming
In
of the Shrew.
Padua.
Yeah.
Exactly. The next line of Thee I Sing.
Isn't it Walt Whitman?
My suggestion is My Country 'Tis of Thee.
And it's also a musical called Of Thee I Sing.
It's a Gershwin musical, and that's
Gershwin.
where the title song comes from. It comes, in fact, from Samuel Francis Smith's song America.
America.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we have in the next line, do we have a title there?
Jesus.
the
What
Bible.
about Jesus?
Love My Neighbour crops up in Leviticus and St. Mark's. Then, and Do Speak Low, and do we have a title after that?
The Night Has
The Night Has 1,000 Eyes. Anybody
There's
know
a
the
poem
Yes,
by somebody I can't pronounce and know nothing of, called Bourdillon, or Bourdillon.
It's absolutely right. He lived from 1852 to 1921.
I know a little
and
bit
the
more about him now.
poem was called Light, so we now know 3 more things about him. F.W. Bourdillon. But speaking though, I feel I have to say that I don't think I'll fall in love today. Can anybody give a source for that?
Noel Coward?
No.
I thought it was Prayed.
No, it's in fact, it's an Ira Gershwin song again, and he says that it was suggested to him by Chesterton's poem, A Ballad of Suicide, I think I will not hang myself today. So I think you did get virtually 11, even if some of them were wrong, so could we have a round of applause for both teams? We call this next round Near the Knuckle, because we're going to give you 2 quotations in which a famous writer discusses or describes a near relative. In this one, the reader is not the writer. And the first one, John, goes for you. Sound only.
He never objected to the idea of rest, but if you would mention that you would work on a book, a look of intense concern would immediately be seen to fix itself on his face, and he would issue, in a tone suggesting that you were proposing something rash beyond hardihood, such as trying to swim the Atlantic for a wager, one of his customary and familiar warnings. "Oh, I shouldn't do that if I were you. You'd better drop the idea at once. My cousin Stephen Arthington had a friend who utterly ruined his health by writing a novel."
It's somebody's father who doesn't want him to write books much.
Yes, that's true of most fathers.
Yes, it isn't Robin Morm, is it?
No.
His father had all his books, just bought them up and had them destroyed.
It's not quite the same
No.
generation. Generation back, that's the man in question.
Is that his father? Or
That's the father.
Oh, I see.
It's the father of Sir Richard Burton, except this man's wearing the wrong hat for Sir
No,
Richard.
it's not even the father of Richard Burton. The writer of the book had a brother and a sister. Both
Sitwell's.
Sitwell's is right.
Ah, right.
So it becomes which book?
Left hand, right hand, and
It's
down the middle.
It's. Does anybody want to offer Osbert's book about his father?
I must say, I thought it was called Left Hand, Right Hand.
Ah,
No,
well, this one
left-
comes from Laughter in the Next Room.
I see.
Right. John, you've. I thought you'd got that. I mean, that's the eccentric father of that generation. You've now written the definitive book about the eccentric father of your generation.
Perhaps it's replaced it, do you think?
Yours? Oh, well, certainly. Well, they're not doing his on Book of Bedtime, are they, at all?
No, I haven't actually read it, but I'm sure it is very good.
Antonia, lots of people would think that your father is eccentric. I mean, having a father who lots of people think is eccentric, does he seem eccentric to you, or does he seem the norm?
He always, I mean, I've thought him eccentric for 50 years. The world's only just caught up.
Right. Well, we'll go on to Antonia's writer on a writer. This is another writer on another relation. This is a girl talking about a girl.
My sister's disposition was not naturally gregarious. Circumstances favoured and fostered her tendency to seclusion. Except to go to church or take a walk on the hills, she rarely crossed the threshold of home. Though her feeling for the people round was benevolent, intercourse with them she never sought, nor, with very few exceptions, ever experienced. And yet she knew them.
Well, those hills, it must be Charlotte Bronte on her sister Emily?
Yes, it is exactly Charlotte Bronte on her sister Emily. Got it in one. It did well done. The next round is about writers and their landscapes. In this round, we're going to show you film of a building, which was a vivid part of the real-life landscape of a writer and was used equally vividly in that writer's fiction. The first, again, is yours, John. So a little look at your screen.
Right. There it loomed up, stark and straight, glaring white and black, and one could see the waves breaking in white splinters like smashed glass upon the rocks.
I could see the whole team relax there. Who's going to speak for you?
Well, is it a lighthouse?
Yes, it is a lighthouse.
And are we going to it, this lighthouse?
You could be. I mean,
It's a real lighthouse.
That's a real lighthouse. Yes, there is. Did you not know there was a real lighthouse?
I'd always assumed it was some sort of phallic and imaginary lighthouse.
Would somebody care to answer the question first before we go into a discussion of the work? If you answer the question correctly, you might get a round of applause.
Yeah, we'll get a round of applause.
Note that you're going to it across the waves.
Yeah. Miss Virginia Woolf and her lighthouse.
Right, round of applause for John Morton and his team.
Thank you, everyone.
Do you know where the real lighthouse was set?
I'm afraid I don't. I always thought it was an imaginary lighthouse, too.
It was transmuted, I suppose, but John has the answer over here.
St Ives, wasn't it, or Cornwall?
Yes,
it would be Cornwall, yes.
Yes, the Wolves went every summer in their mobile home to St Ives.
But it's Skye in the book. Their imaginary mobile home goes to Skye in the book, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. We now come to Antonia's team. We have a second landscape, perhaps not quite so familiar, but that shouldn't stop your team identifying it, even in translation. Heavy clue, Antonia.
As one drew near, gathering close about his long, dark cloak, sheltering from the wind on the open plain, as a shepherd gathers his sheep, the woolly grey backs of its flocking houses.
Yes.
Daring use of the adjective flocking houses. Then.
Is it the person that Monty Python once used to refer to as Proust?
Yes, it is indeed. And can you give me, so you get to, let's have the equal round of applause for a totally correct answer on that side. And can you tell me what he called the village around which that
Yes,
nestled around?
he called it Cambrai, and it's really called Illier.
That's Right. We go on to the next round. We go back again to sound clues for our clues. This time you're going to hear some of the most famous quotations in English literature translated into exotic, filthy foreign languages. To show how kind we're being, we shall put the least famous quotes in the more familiar languages. Sally, we'll start with you with a very easy language.
C'est une vérité universellement reconnue qu'un célibataire en possession d'une importante fortune ne peut se passer de femme. Aussi, lorsqu'il s'installe dans une nouvelle résidence, cette vérité est tellement ancrée dans l'esprit des familles environnantes qu'il est immédiatement considéré comme la propriété légitime de l'une ou l'autre de leurs filles.
I'm sure you can...
Beginning of Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely right. By Jane Austen, and the
Jane
language
Austen.
in which... well done, Sally. It's tremendous. Getting Jane Austen was easy, but getting French was really quite tricky. John Gross, here's one in another foreign tongue for you.
Fu il tempo migliore, fu il tempo peggiore. Fu l'epoca di saggezza, fu l'epoca di buffoneria. Fu l'epoca di fede e l'epoca di incredulità. Fu la stagione di luce e la stagione del buio. Fu la primavera di speranza e l'inverno di disperazione. Abbiamo avuto tutto davanti a noi ed anche nulla di fronte. Ci siamo piantati sulla strada andare al paradiso e anche quella strada andare all'inferno.
That's it.
I think that's Carlo Dickens.
Carlo Dickens.
And it's A Tale of Two Cities.
Right. Carlo Dickens. And what did you think it was going to be, Antonia?
I thought it was Ecclesiastes.
That would have been more improving,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't have been the right answer. So we go on to Angela Carter. Here is yours.
Mein Herz tut weh und dumpfe Starrheit presst den Sinn, als hätte Schierling ich getrunken oder eine zähes Rauschgift bis zum Rest geleert und wäre leterwärts versunken.
His heart sinks in a drowsy numbness.
Yes, his
does
heart
it?
aches, actually.
Sorry, his heart
Ah.
aches, forgive me, and a drowsy numbness.
Pains, and his sense as though hemlock he had drunk.
Yeah. Keats, yes?
Keats and the ode to... Now, which ode?
Melancholy, is it?
No.
It's not melancholy.
Anybody want to
forgive
rip
me.
off the right ode?
Nightingale.
Right, correct,
Flute
John.
Nightingale.
We go on to the next one, which is for Salman Rushdie.
Αύριο και αύριο και αύριο γλιστράει με σερνάμενο βήμα από μέρα σε μέρα ως την ύστερη συλλαβή του χρόνου. Κι όλα μας τα χτες φωτίσαν σαν γεριά το δρόμο των μωρών στο χωματένιο θάνατο.
Well, it's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow.
Yes.
It's, like, it's Greek.
Yes, it's modern Greek, I think we can say, can't we? Quite safely, yes. Both. That's very good. Now we have one for team captain John Mortimer.
I shan't get
Testing.
明日が来たり明日が去りまた来たりまた去って時は忍び足に小刻みに記録に残る最後の1分まで経過してしまう。
Well, how about that?
Noticed that
You've been told the right language by your colleague on the left.
What did you say it is? It's Japanese.
Yeah.
I'm very unfamiliar with the Japanese language. I haven't got the slightest idea what it is.
Anybody, any fluent Japanese speakers over there?
To be or not to be?
No. It's really, I think, a sneaky question why they didn't get another one. It's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow again, I'm afraid. It's doubling up on that. Now, for Antonia, we have the really tricky one.
Kuwa au kutokuwa? Hilo ndilo swali. Kwamba ni lipi tukufu zaidi? Kusononeka moyoni tu kwa teo na mishale ya mateso na udhalilifu, au ni kuchukua silaha na kupambana na mkondo wa mateso na maafa, na kwa kufanya hivyo ukayakomesha? Kufa ni kama kulala, hakuna cha zaidi. Na kwa kufa tukasema twayakomesha maonevu haya na mateso ya mwanadamu, na hili ndilo la kutarajiwa mno.
I can't actually tell you how far he's gone.
Something tells me that might be to be or
We've
not
got to be or not. Yes.
Yeah.
I could see you get it when he got to slings and arrows.
Exactly, I recognised it.
Anybody care to have a guess at the language?
I think it's Swahili.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Did somebody tell you that it was Swahili?
No, I knew it.
Oh, well done.
I know a great deal of Shakespeare in Swahili, but I will spare you that on this occasion.
Can you say any Swahili, like good morning or good night or anything like that?
Not except for further money. So
Right, okay. And we'll leave that for the world service. Right. Now, most of the programme so far has been devoted to books you can't put down. We go now to our true confessions round of classic books which you can't finish. This is not so much a question as a statement of human frailty. We'll take the captain's confessions first, if you please. John Mortimer, what classic are you most ashamed of not finishing or not even being able to pick up?
Well, I'm not at all ashamed of them.
Which are you proudest of?
Well, I've never actually picked up, for instance, Don Quixote. And I think I shall go down to the grave without ever having picked it up.
But you can go to the National Theatre and see a potted version of that.
No, I shall avoid that, but I can read, if possible, but I can read Graham Greene's Monsignor Quixote, which I believe is very good, and which will tell me what it was all about. There's another book called The Buddenbrooks, which I'm very pleased never to have opened.
You might find some opponents on that one. And Antonia, does anybody want to defend Buddenbrooks before we move on? Nope, nobody wants to defend that. Antonia, what do you not mind confessing that you haven't been able to get through or pick up?
I don't mind confessing that I have never read one word of Dostoevsky, because nobody ever believes it. They always say, oh, come on, you're just saying it. But actually, you see, I'm waiting. It's so wonderful to think it all lies ahead. And as you could see, I could guess Crime and Punishment with the best of them.
Have you ever been on that desert island with Roy Plumley? Because you could take the whole of Dostoevsky when you get asked.
What a frightful... If insulting to Roy Plumley...
What about Angela? Do you have one that you want to confess?
Job.
It's a very short book.
Yes, but I assume that I've leafed through it, actually. I cannot say I have never picked it up, because it's impossible to move a Bible from one place to another without picking up the book of Job, isn't it?
Nice,
but I've never got through it. I find it very depressing.
You've never had any of the same complaints?
Well, no, it's just that being a passionate hypochondriac, of course, I do start coming out in boils. And I have to fling the covers too. Because one can't come out in boils.
Oh, it's
Mrs. Dalloway as well. Mrs. Dalloway.
Yeah.
I've had trouble with Mrs. Dalloway.
She sounds like your daily lady. You make her sound like your daily lady.
Would to God.
Salman.
Well, I suppose I could join the Thomas Mann hatred society by saying I'd never read The Magic Mountain. Because the idea of 700 pages of people discussing philosophy in a sanatorium on top of a mountain somehow was resistible. But since this is really humiliation, I should admit that I've never read Middlemarch.
Yeah.
It wins, doesn't it?
Yes, very good. Yes, that's the most criminal missing out so far. What about you, Sally?
I've got one nearly as bad, I think. It's not quite so bad because it's a lot longer, so a lot of other people won't have read it as well. But it's War and Peace.
John, what's your confession?
Embarrassment of riches. Riches and embarrassment. Take Everyman's Library, World Classics, Penguin Classics, divide them by 2, multiply by 3, add the number you first thought of. There's so many. They certainly overlap with quite a few of the titles I've mentioned. I suppose it's got to be, if there's one. I have actually read Job, but if we're talking about books, the book of books, I've never read the Bible. Not right through.
Not right through. Does anybody share mine? I have tried, being a West Countryman, I've tried many times to read Westward Ho, and I get about one chapter further each time. I've got about to number 5 now in 50 years, so it's one chapter every 10 years. Has anybody read Westward Ho all the way through?
I read the Comic Classics version of it.
Classics
that was quite
Illustrated.
stirring. Do you remember
Quite
Classics
good,
Illustrated?
yes.
It's called Amias.
Right, anyway, that's the end. We get even more marks in this non-marked quiz for the confessions than you did for the brilliance early on. It's thank you indeed to John Mortimer's team and to Antonia Fraser's side. As Byron said, all farewells should be sudden. Or was it Frederick Raphael? So in the words of one of the most quoted authors, Anon, in one of his best-loved lyrics, there is a tavern in the town, fare thee well, for we must leave thee, do not let the parting grieve thee. Good night.
Thank you.